So, how about them audio levels?
They are in good shape, just like last week.
Yeah, good job with that.
Yeah.
We need to apologize to Skip, I think.
Oh, we will apologize personally to Skip, but we'll also say sorry, Skip. The audio levels on Chapter 5, Horror 2.0, were no good. There was too much background noise. There was some weirdness going on with the equipment, and I apologize for all that.
And after hearing myself repeat the same sentence for a half an hour, I was finally just like, all right, I'm dropping the executive hammer here. We're done.
Let's not work on this anymore.
Yeah, we're not playing with that.
So we're going to get into Podcast 5, I guess, with the lost episode in between 4 and 5. But tonight we're going to talk about motivation. But we got a friend here, Sean Ed.
Hello.
And we wanted to... He's been reading some of the Friday Night Rides stories, and we wanted to see what he thought.
Yeah, I brushed up a little bit on... I've been kind of keeping track of what you guys have been doing throughout, and the most recent ones I read was The Door by Fuzz, and then I also read The Jenkins House by Jonesy. And loved them both. Thought they were excellent. I had a couple questions just because I'm trying to wrap my mind around, it's been a while since we've all, spent some time, breathed the same air, so I'm trying to just kind of wrap my mind around a few of it. Fuzz on The Door. What was your kind of motivation for a door that just is there?
Like I had said beforehand, a lot of it, I was watching an old episode of Twilight Zone, and there was, I'm trying to remember because I was in and out, I was doing other stuff at the time, but there was this doorway that went just elsewhere, and it was just a random door, and you opened it and you just went somewhere that you weren't supposed to be, and it kind of harkened back to elements from The Dark Tower, because that was really prevalent in the early parts, and even in the later parts, these doors that would just go to another thing. And I started just thinking to myself, how funny would it be that there was a random door in a random house somewhere that you would open it up and it would take you into another dimension, and it was just like a 1 degree dimension away from Autumnville. And so you would walk in and you would see all the same people that you would see in your normal world, but they would be somehow kind of turned on their heel from what it was. And the original design was to actually go in and show these characters meeting their alternate selves and doing all these kind of gags and shit with it. And as I was writing it, I kind of just got to a point where I was like, you know what, I want to cut this down by about 5,000 words. Like, I don't need to have this huge conversation where my characters are just kind of talking to themselves going, you are awesome. And, and so I was just like, how can I do this in a way that is going to be a little more streamlined, but still be weird, and have an ending that isn't necessarily like a hard line, like, I get it. I wanted to sort of slip it in there so that if you're really not paying attention, you will miss the point of the end.
Yeah.
And
I kind of noticed that. I almost kind of tripped over it for a second because I was, not to give anything away, but you kind of explain but they're looking for a guy from the other side. Yeah. And then you're kind of like, you kind of start connecting the dots, but then at the very end, I almost was like wanting to see what, because I love the idea that there's an alternate universe where people just have facial hair that makes them evil. Yeah. And I instantly thought of like Futurama and Bender and how
the evil Bender,
the evil Bender that's actually good because Bender's a jerk. Yeah. But he has a goatee, like a magnetic goatee. Yeah. And that makes him bad. And I actually thought it was great how you didn't go in and explain what the other world was like. You kind of just get a picture of it,
Yeah.
Just enough for a visual as a reader, but that you didn't go in and really kind of church it up a lot. You just were like, they came out all of a sudden, it was like, you missed this, like, because as seeing it from Mac's point of view, I was like, I wanted to kind of see what had happened, and I felt like I missed out on something, but that was what was the beauty of that transition.
Yeah.
Because I think it would have been too wordy to just describe stuff.
One of the things that I kind of use as a guideline for all of the Autumnville stuff is that style that Mike Mignola did Hellboy in, where it was, he could have run rampant with a lot of his stories, but instead he would just sort of get to the point, and that was that.
Leave the mystery.
Yeah, there was no, he didn't take the time out to explain it to you, and if he did take the time out to explain something to you, it was important.
Right.
And I kind of try to keep that in mind whenever I'm writing, and and I get complaints on a relatively regular basis about why don't you explain more?
Yeah.
And I'm like, because that's the point. Like I would rather you read a story, get the point, and then go, well, what was the deal with that? And that gives me the option to come back to the door in 5 years.
Building the mythos.
Yeah.
And I mean, as mortals, we shouldn't be knowing everything that's happening.
Yeah.
And like you said, if you want to come back to it and make it a point and elaborate, then that's like we've been buying at the bit to know about it anyway.
Yeah, like, one of the things that I think a lot of fiction does wrong, or at least there is a slight error in judgment, is that people are in this mad rush to spoon feed everything to a reader as fast as possible. And I feel like a lot of that is because a lot of the new fiction, like your 50 Shades, your Harry Potters, your Twilights, these are things that there is definitely mystery involved, but they do have a tendency to kind of lay it down in front and say, here's what this is, here's what it's for, here's what it does, and it'll get used at some point. This is going to happen. Oh, okay, fair enough. And I look back at Lovecraft, and for some reason I started reading The Gods of Pagania, however, it's a Lord Dunsany book. And like Neil Gaiman described him as being influenced by the King James Bible and nothing else. And it's hard to read, but it's really interesting. And in those kinds of stories, there's no grand explanation. Lovecraft is just like, the universe is massive. There's crazy stuff in it. It does not give two shits if you live or die. It's going to do what it's going to do, and that's how it is. And I kind of want to use that same vibe in Autumnville.
I've noticed one thing on that is that, and I see it because I've got two teenage girls, and both of them, I really try to promote a lot of reading at the house because, I mean, there's so much else going on with like video games and all that's constantly assaulting their senses. But and I'm happy to see they're both readers, but I do notice that the teen fiction that's so prominent right now, like, and I don't by any means think that it's lazy, but in a way, because it's geared towards teenagers and that kind of mindset of focusing their attention because their attention spans are so short. I think also it's a draw for a lot of adults because of that same reasoning. Because I know, so like Hunger Games, which is huge, right out of the gate, they, like you said, it lays out the entire explanation of the world in like a 2-sentence synopsis. And you're just kind of like, there's no exploring through the eyes of the hero. It's just more like, it's here, boom, this is what you got, and then just deal. And but my kids, that's kind of their mindset because they're so used to having everything given to them in flashes. Where the three of us growing up, we didn't have the internet, as a main source like that. I mean, it was in its prime as HTML.
No wonder we made it this far. Really,
it is. But anyway, I thought it was a great story. And I really
cool. I appreciate it.
I'm interested to see if you're going to bring Mac around elsewhere.
He is actually in another story that is yet to be published, but cool. He's kind of a background character, and I think he gets killed.
Oh,
but I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember. He might not. Yeah, it's tough to remember. After a while, like the cast of Autumnville is so huge because it's based on people that I've met in my real life, and so as I meet people, I'm like, that guy's a character. I'm putting him into the story, and so inevitably, when I get fed up with those characters, I'm like, I'm killing you.
Just have a reckoning.
Yeah.
Jonesy, I read The Jenkins House and really just thought it was awesome because the creative mind behind the mythology that you've got going, Beezy and Whitey are just, I think it's great. And Eli, that poor man. What he's going through. I think if you walk away from any short story like that, and the last spoken words are what they are, and I don't want to say it because we're supposed to be keeping it clean here, but it's like, and he's running away saying this, and I'm just like, I actually, laugh out loud. I was literally just sitting there like chuckling to myself, going, "Oh my gosh, that poor guy." And that's just how it ends.
Yeah.
It's like to be continued elsewhere.
And so that's like of the NaNoWriMo project that I'm working on.
Yeah.
It's Eli's autobiography. It's awesome. His memoirs, okay? And that is chapter 1. And I kind of agonized over doing that because it's the middle of the story. It's not the beginning.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff that he has to explain. But me and Fuzz were talking about it one night. I was like, I think I want to open with this. He's like, yeah. He's like, that's really like a Garth Ennis thing to do, like a preacher thing to do. And I was like, yeah. So, the idea was, to make, it's going to, because I know that Eli comes off kind of like an asshole in it.
Very snarky.
All he does is snark on people. All he does is talk trash. But, earlier in his life, he's not that way. He has become that way because of all this awful stuff that he's seen and gone through.
Yeah.
And, that episode is one of the worst things that he's been a part of. But there's a whole litany of awful shit that he's been party to. So the idea was to, grab the reader by the shoulders, say, hey, look at this mess that you're about to enter into because this thing is sloppy.
Yeah.
And here it is. So I think it's fun to write from that first person perspective like that and from that guy's perspective.
No, it was great. My only beef was that I wanted to know more on some of it. Like there was a part where he's talking about the cops, and I wanted interaction. I wish I could have seen him. Because the way he's describing him, I almost wanted to see what he would say to these guys.
Yeah.
Like my imagination was already like queued up and like, and the way he's describing their slang, and you're writing stuff in the way that they would talk. It was hilarious. But I think that the whole Grim Reaper versus Guardian Angel is just, in the fact that you're kind of throwing this in. I'm interested to see, how expansive the mythos is going to be. If you're going to be throwing in more world building stuff with other creatures, or if it's going to be kind of focusing on these two things and kind of a sin versus absolution. And it's just either way, it was really really.
And the idea started off as the angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other.
Sure.
So that was the premise behind this idea.
Yeah.
Was that you got we had a prompt once that was the thing about good and evil is. And that was the prompt. And that's where I invented these three characters. Because it's like, here's the good guy. It's Whitey. He's a blatant racist, homophobic asshole.
Yeah.
But he does save people. Here's the bad guy.
Right.
He's a whiny, crying, underhanded, smoking emo kid. And, he's not so bad, but he does kill people.
Yeah.
So that's the... and
I love like him waking up and they're not even attempting to help him. They're just more busy, posturing on the situation and which one of them is right. It's just a dynamic. I think is going to be able to. You're going to be able to do so much with it,
and it's really a lot of fun to write because of that.
It was cool because for me because I thoroughly enjoy the world building thing, and Jonesy was having some difficulty with it, and was just like, hey, let me pick your brain for a bit, and we sat out on the porch, and and my first thing was, you got to have something besides these protectors and reapers. It's like you got to throw in something. 2 is good, but 3 gives you balance. And like at least 3, and and we kind of discussed a lot of different things about the storyline, and it was so fun because he already had that initial the initial scene plotted out. He already knew exactly where he wanted to go with the sort of cold open of the story, and it was so hysterical, and it just reminded me of Preacher. It reminded me of Garth Ennis and that style of just being like, I'm going to do something so deeply offensive to your common decency that that you're going to have no choice but to stick with this to see
watch the train wreck.
Just to see how this goes. And awesome. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun writing it.
Yeah, well, it's definitely inspiring work. I mean, even for just you guys doing it for your every week thing, it just reading both of them. It's a lot of they're both great reads, and I'm definitely gonna be queuing people in on it because it's really good stuff.
Awesome.
Well, I'm gonna agree.
I think I will too.
Yeah. Roll the music.
Let's do it.
Hey everybody, welcome to Friday Night Writes, podcast about storytelling. With me, as always, is Go Jonesy.
Hey everyone.
My name's Fuzz, and our special guest tonight is Sean Edmondson, aka the Sean Ed.
Hello.
Who is a friend of ours from many, many moons ago. Yes. He is a fellow storyteller, and always good to have another set of eyes on screwing things up.
That's for sure.
So,
and we are good at that.
Yep. So, to get right into it, what are we doing first? NaNoWriMo?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about NaNoWriMo. I mean, first we can cover, this week we're going to get into a little bit of motivation and that dirty answer to, every time somebody asks, how do I get motivated to write? How do I write more? How do you write? And the answer is always,
dickhead says,
I just write.
Just write.
Just do it. Like it's a Nike ad. So we're gonna try to comb over that answer a little bit, smooth it out, and we're gonna talk about a lot of different motivational techniques and everything like that. But first, it is NaNoWriMo. We're into it. We had an update last week, which last week's podcast is now in the annals of the forgotten and lost podcasts of the world.
Yeah.
So this is podcast 6, but technically 5, and all that's really confusing. But we're in NaNoWriMo, and Fuzz and myself, we have both gotten into writing a story for the month. So the idea is to write 50,000 words in the month of November. Just do it, be done with it, and then you can edit later, whatever the case may be, however your style is. But the idea is to write every day. The idea is to build a habit to write every day. So it's perfect that we're going to talk about motivation tonight. But first, I thought we could do a couple of updates on what we're writing and how far along we are in the process. So how about you, Fuzz? What are you working on and where are you at?
I am working on the season 1 sort of experiment for Autumnville. And I absolutely can't stand NaNoWriMo. It makes me insane. every day is, I just dread having to sit down at my typewriter because every time I tap a key, I know that it could be one more character going towards my word count. And, my biggest thing about NaNoWriMo is that, you don't get time off for good behavior. You don't get time off for nothing. It's just brutal as hell from beginning to end. But ultimately, it is enjoyable. I'm having a blast writing my story. I'm basically taking some old school characters that kind of got developed during the old tabletop role-playing days, and I've been reinventing them and putting them into this Autumnville sort of world. And it's been a lot of fun, especially over the last few days, because I realized real quick that it was going to get away from me if I didn't stop and just do a real hard outline that was going to be a guide for me to go bit by bit by bit. And what was cool was that doing it that way gave me the means to write just a clip of something that I needed to get done and then stop and not really worry about the word count, the daily count, any of that stuff, because the next clip might be 4 times the size of the one that I wrote today. And so, and doing it that way lets me kind of get hyped about doing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It's one of the things that I used to do last year when we were doing just the prompts. And we had that huge list of the writing prompts, and everybody was jumping for the ones that they really, that just popped out at them right away. And I went through the list and was just like, yeah, that's the one I can't think of something for. That's the one I'm going to do. And so, the initial part of any story, unless you're writing something a little more comedic or something like that, is generally the setup and the humdrum kind of parts after you get that cold open done, where you kind of punch the reader in the face and say, come with me. And that setup part can kind of suck to write because you already know it, and a part of you just wants to get to the cool stuff. So having to do it this way has really made it so that I know beforehand, okay, this is going to be a setup piece, this is going to be something that's going to pay off later, all that kind of stuff, so that I kind of have a gauge now of the whole month and being able to say, okay, this week is going to be a real heavy week because there's going to be a lot of action, a lot of this and that, and this week is going to be a light week because of it's going to be mostly exposition and mostly setting, building my set and all that stuff, so that my characters can move around in it later. And but all in all, like I said, it's been enjoyable, as much as the whole idea grates on me. But
Sure.
it's been fun.
But the a lot of what has driven me and kept me going, because I reached a point late last week where I was like, none of this works. This story does not work. So I had to sit down, and because of the accountability for the process, for the NaNoWriMo, and because Fuzz and I are sharing our progress with each other, I had to sit down and I had to force myself to outline, instead of the easy way where I could say, well, this isn't coming to me, so I'm going to go watch Mr. Robot, or I'm going to go watch something on television.
Which you should do.
I'm through 3 episodes.
Is it not the most awesome?
It's very good.
It's so good.
It's very good.
So good. Are you watching Mr. Robot? You need to watch Mr. Robot. It is so good.
We can stop recording and I'll go watch it.
That's all right.
Okay. But anyway, so, I got into my story. I had an opening that I liked a lot that kind of set the tone for the way I wanted the story to run. There was a little bit of humor in it. It was kind of funny in a morbid way, and it kind of showed you the 3 main characters you were going to take this journey with. But then after that, I was like, well, now I have to get there. Uh-oh.
Yeah,
I'm stuck.
That's tough.
And so the idea of just keeping the gears turning was difficult at first, but as soon as I sat down and, like you said, I gave myself a hard outline. I did the story beats. I said, this. This is my story. I'll get 50,000 words here.
For this episode, do me a favor and in the notes, drop in those.
The Evernote
templates. The Evernote
templates.
Templates. Those are so helpful.
Yeah, there are. And there's ones that cover world building and character development and the 3-act structure and all that stuff. That'll be in the YouTube notes and everything like that. But so far, I'm a little bit behind. I'm a few thousand words behind. I think 3,000. And I'm hoping to get most of that done tonight when we're done here. And we're through 9 days, right? And well, as of the recording of this will come out a few days later, but we're through 9 days of writing, through 9 days of this process. And so far, every time I've sat down to get into my scenes and to start having the dialogue and everything like that, I've had a blast. And the time's flown. And it hasn't been as laborious as it is when you're thinking about it. And then you're like, ugh, I got to go do this.
Yeah.
And then once you sit down and start actually putting words down, it's a lot easier than...
I started using a program. The name of it is escaping me right now. I'll try to remember it and just add in a note on Facebook or something or on YouTube for it. But it gives me a word count per hour.
Nice.
And it's almost painful. Like, one of the things that I realized is that my first 2 hours of any writing is essentially me usually either rereading everything that I've done or researching what I'm going to do, and my word count is so abysmal. I mean, like, it is pathetic. Like, I had an hour where I had 8 words, and I really thought I'd made progress. I was just like, man, I'm trucking tonight. And I look and I'm like, 8. I was like, what? And then, like, I stopped and was like, what the hell? And of course, by midnight, I was doing 2,500 words in an hour. But, you know, it was just like, it just seems for me, it just seems like the later I go, the more the axles get greased up and I'm able to pump out stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, we will return to that tonight, but that momentum thing is real.
Yeah.
And it definitely helps you get through. So I'm going to cover a couple things about the website real quick before we get into the main discussion. Since we haven't said it yet and we're over 10 minutes in here, we are our website is FridayNightWrites.net. We're a writing community, storytelling community. On the site, you join up, you post stories, or you can just go there and read. We encourage people to comment because we're trying to start a conversation about storytelling and about writing. It's for writers of all levels.
Yeah, even if you read it and you go, well, I liked it. I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah.
Well, then just type in, hey, I liked it. You know, it's not that hard. It's not going to break your fingers. You know, you're going to have a great time. When you're done, you're going to feel good. You're going to have made Jonesy happy.
For sure.
You're going to have made me happy. You know, and we're going to be able to say something back to you like, hey, thanks.
You're the best.
Yes.
Guy.
You know, some kind of conversation. You know, we appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And ultimately, we want to get more writers involved. We want to get more content on the site, and we just want to proliferate it a little bit.
That was good.
Thanks. Along with the stories on the site, there's a blog that's going to become more active as we get going here. Some of the resources we talk about on the podcast, we're going to start posting on there, showing people like these Evernote templates I was talking about. You know, here's how you use these, here's where they're at, all this. But also the podcast feed is on there. And so far, we're through 4 episodes, not 5, of the podcast, and they're all on YouTube. And we've had some feedback on YouTube from a fan who's said, hey, I'd really like to get these in iTunes because then I just have them right on my phone. And I agree because that's how I listen to podcasts. I don't go on YouTube to listen to podcasts. So I'm pretty sure that I will have a podcast feed up by the end of the week. So that'll be available on our website also. And then it will also be available in iTunes.
Nice.
So you'll be able to put that feed into whatever podcast program you have. Maybe if you have an Android phone or a Windows phone or whatever. Or iTunes will have it also. So you'll be able to discover us on there. And we would appreciate it if you gave us a like and a subscription on YouTube, if you gave us a like and a subscribe on iTunes. Any kind of feedback you guys have, that would be awesome for us, so this doesn't turn into an echo chamber all the time. Because we think we're pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Yeah. I mean, Fuzz knows. You know, there's some doubts, but we would like to hear back from you guys.
Yeah.
So, what do you guys think? You guys want to talk about motivation?
Yeah, let's talk about motivation. I just don't feel like it tonight.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go watch Mr. Robot.
Okay.
All right. We'll be right back with motivation. This week, because it's NaNoWriMo, we've been focusing a lot on writing habits and everything like that. We thought that this would be a good podcast or a good week to put out something about motivation and habit and trying to stick to your writing habits, your writing process and everything like that. So I dug up and have studied before a lot of methods surrounding motivation and productivity and habit building and everything like that. And I thought that this would be a good opportunity for us to really dig deep into that and expose what we know that works, or what we've heard that works, or what works for us, or what doesn't work for us but might work for you, and all that gray area that's in there.
Right.
Up front, I do want to point out that I've read a lot about this stuff, but my memory is not infallible. And, you know, I'm going to quote science, I'm going to quote data, I'm going to quote research that's been done, and I might be wrong about all of it, but I'm pretty close on some of it. So just bear that in mind. That's a little disclaimer.
So what you're saying is there's a good chance,
this
like
is
a 95% chance that you're wrong,
yeah.
But you're close enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
Yeah. And I'll be the first to admit it later if I ever do the research again.
Yeah, if you ever do the research. It'll be Horror 3.0.
Horror 3.0. Jonesy visits the internet.
Yeah.
So, anyway, motivation, habit building, all that good stuff. Really, where I want to start is with habit building. A lot of what everything points back to is building momentum and building habits for a task you want to accomplish. So in this case, we're talking about storytelling, or more importantly, writing, because, you know, in any way, shape, or form you want to tell a story, visually, whatever, you're going to have to communicate that through some process. And that process, you know, comes back to a habit. So we're going to start with a quote from this guy. I don't think a lot of people have heard of him. His name's Aristotle. And way back when he existed, he said, "What we are, what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." And what we get into is we get into routine. We get into doing the same thing over and over and over again to build up that workmanship and those muscles that work, that fire every day, and the brain that keeps working, and back into that process every day. And some of the science that's been done and research on habit forming has pointed back to, well, it takes 21 days of deliberate, doing it every day, time to build a habit. Some others have said, no, it's more like 60 days, and I've seen as high as 72 days, and all that stuff, anywhere in between. But let's focus on 21. Let's say it takes at least 3 weeks to develop a habit. What that means is you have to get up every day and get right to work on whatever it is you want to work on. So in our case, we're going to talk about storytelling, we're going to talk about writing. So one of the main points is to find a good time of day for you. When is it easiest for you to get into your groove, sit down, and do the task? When is that time of your day? Is it the same time every day? Building a habit, it probably should be. And the importance of habit in a lot of different things is about finding that same time every day, or that same zone every day. If you have a chaotic life, if you work a sporadic schedule, then saying I do this every day after I get off work. So if you get off work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or you get off work at 10 o'clock at night, you're still returning to that task. And that's what helps you build the habit. So a lot of this is going to come back to that, but what I wanted to talk about first was maybe some methods that I've read about or that you guys have read about that helps people stay motivated, stay on task, stick to their writing. And one of the ones that I think works for me a lot is accountability. So what I do is I post publicly, hey, here are my goals. Here's what I want to accomplish for the next 60 days or 90 days. And I publish that in a blog. So I'm accountable to the readers of that blog, which is generally my mom and about 8 friends, But at least then I can tell them what I've been doing, what my day was like, and here's what I'm trying to do to get better tomorrow. And then I can get feedback from people, and you have an accountability partner in that sense. Me and Fuzz are doing that a lot now with the NaNoWriMo thing, where we're kind of checking in with each other every day, say, hey man, how was your day today? Is your word count there? How's your story going? Are you stuck on anything? Blah, blah, blah. And that's a big boost for a lot of people. It works for me. I don't know about you, Fuzz. Does that speak to you at all when we kind of talk to each other about our process?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know if it's motivational, but it's the kind of thing where, I know that, potentially you and someone else are going to be crawling up my ass if I get far behind. And so it's just a matter of, fine, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But I'm deliberately fussy about NaNoWriMo.
Sure.
But yeah, first of all, though, I do want to cut back something. I want to say that Aristotle was a dick. And, I think one of the key things to remember about motivation, for me, and I don't think this is in any of the stuff that you've researched, but it is something that we've talked about before, is that, for me, when I want to get motivated to do something, it's always a matter of baby steps. Whether it's, you're going to clean the apartment today, or you're going to write 10,000 words before you go to bed. It's always baby steps. It's always set the bar super low so I can step over it and yay, big boy potty, and it's all good to go. Once I get a little bit of hype in it, then I can go, okay, cool. This next step isn't so tough. And, it's just a series of little wins that lead up to the big one. And, for things like building a habit and stuff like that, I think I'm an odd duck because I don't, my habits are more kind of based in my personality and the fact that I've been kind of doing the same things for the last 15, 20 years now. More or less since around the time that I met you guys and we started, doing the role-playing thing. That really turned storytelling from a sideline into almost a profession. I had to get real good real fast at developing and world building and plotting and storying and all that stuff. And so it's just been kind of a part of my existence for so long that, for me, motivation is get up, smoke a cigarette, sit down, boot up the computer. The first thing that pops up is my writing program, and my desktop background is "you should be writing." And so, as soon as I'm up, that's the first thing I see, and I'm like, damn you, computer.
How did you know?
Yeah, and So, but it's been a part of my lifestyle for so long that, and I realize that not everybody can afford to do that.
But that's a part of habit, though. What you are describing is you got your baby steps, and that's a part of forming a habit. So if you want to sit down and write every morning when you get up, you make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
As unobtrusive as possible to sit down and start writing.
Yeah.
You make sure there's nothing in your way. If you got a coffee pot that's got a fancy timer on it, you set it to brew at a certain time. You get up, your coffee's already made. All you have to do is pour a cup, go sit down and write. And I mean, that's kind of what you have going on, because even there, you don't, your computer doesn't ship to you ready to boot up Q10 or whatever you're writing or whatever your word processor
usually
is.
Q10.
Yeah. So it's not shipped to you that way. You have to say, I want this thing to pop up when I log in.
Yeah.
So you have created steps, baby steps, like you said, to set up your habit to get you started.
But oddly enough, my computer was the one who put in "you should be writing."
Oh, I'm sure. Computers do that all the time.
They make up their own shit.
They do.
They're creepy.
They do.
They are creepy.
They are.
But yeah, I don't know. This was kind of my closing point, but motivation, I think a lot of people agree or think it's a myth that if we're looking for motivation, we're procrastinating.
Mm-hmm.
We're not actually doing what we want to be doing.
Yeah.
So,
but I think that anyone who's ever done any kind of creative endeavor, I know you'll agree with me, and I know that you'll agree with me, is that, without motivation, without that thing that just gets you hyped up to do it, it could be the easiest thing in the world, and you're just going to look at it and go, I'm not going to waste my time on that today. Or, I'm not going to, whatever the worst genre in the world is for you. Like, let's say it's sword and sorcery, and I say, dude, build me a sword and sorcery world in the next week or two. I know that I can come back in 2 weeks and go, did you build that sword and sorcery world? And you're going to go, not so much. Because
watch Mr. Robot.
Yeah. And I know because you don't care about that genre. That's a genre that for you is just there's no enjoyment in it. And I know that it's the same way with everybody. And the thing is that you get hyped up when your favorite show's on TV tonight. You get hyped up for lunch. You get hyped up to go and see this movie that's coming out at the end of the week or whatever it is. You get hyped up about stuff, and that drives you to go and see it, to go and do it, because by God, I want to be a part of this. And that's such a hard thing about writing and about being creative, is because being creative is more often than not a very lonely art. And finding people to share it with is really an exposing kind of thing. You can build a world and it can be the most hardcore badass thing that you've ever done, but if it is shallow and kind of pedantic and boring, then everyone's going to go, well, yeah, that's cool, man, because they don't want to hurt your feelings.
Right.
But they don't want to be a part of it. They don't want anything to do with it. And
well, I mean, I think what you're saying is, you have to have the bravery to put it out there. And I think him going back to his accountability, having someone, you guys talk about NaNoWriMo right now. One of my main project I'm working on right now, and it's been this way since I first known you guys, is that if I get motivated for something, then eventually.
Sorry.
Did I get it?
No, it's me.
You guys both did it at the same time. But eventually...
we were all picking our notes simultaneously.
Synchronized. We're making sure that there's no bears in the cave.
Yeah.
But that... if I'm doing something, a game, or I'm creating a world building right now with a sword and sorcery, and all of a sudden I go and I see the most awesome sci-fi movie with the coolest idea, and so and as a creative mind, suddenly neurons firing, and I'm like, and my mind traces there. That's only the sword and sorcery thing seems, I don't care as much, but. That's an example of what I'm like right now with the project I'm working on. I've had that outside stimuli wanting to take over and move things, but I've had people that have already devoted, hard-earned money and time to be like, we want this to happen. Don't lose focus.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing. And one of the girl that's a friend of mine that's she's really big in like the physical fitness aspect. She goes to the gym and does all those horrible things that I would never want to do with my life.
Yeah.
And she works out and stuff. And she she's trying to get her boyfriend into it, and he's not. He's like me. He's like, right. I don't do that. I don't run unless I'm running away from something.
Yeah.
And he's like. She's motivating him, probably with Nookie,
right.
which I can't do,
Yeah.
Either I could motivate him,
right?
But she can't motivate me because Mel would kill her.
Yeah.
But the point is that she's like that. She's a motivator. Mm-hmm. She's not so much like a person when she gets motivated by me giving her the option to be creative, mm-hmm. and she in turn holds me accountable by giving her that option. Yeah. And if I don't do that, then she feels like she's missing out.
Right.
And I think that accountability is a very big factor in keeping things going.
Well, I think it works for a lot of people. And, at the end of the day, you have to want to tell a story. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're not going to be motivated to do it.
Yeah.
So, and that goes back to what you were saying. The object is to tell a story. But that object is so far away when you're writing that you sit down to write and you're like, the TV's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's right next to me.
Yeah.
There's even a remote control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can just turn it on.
Jesus has made it easy for me to do this.
The Lord himself invented this remote control. I can turn that television on, not write. I can consume somebody else's story. That's probably awesome. But then I'm further away from my goal.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I had that goal in mind.
And a lot of that, for me, goes back into the baby steps thing. Because having written 5 drafts of Autumnville, or 4, I should say, I'm on the 5th now, is that, when I wrote the first draft, I was spending that time kind of, without getting into the specifics of it, but I was kind of saving my life at that time. And when I finished it and I reread it and I was like, this is garbage. And so then I committed to a second draft. And then when I started committing to the second draft, the story began to change. But it was always about baby steps. It was always about, I know that this first draft had 105 chapters. And so, like, when I got into the second draft, I had read Stephen King's On Writing, and so I sort of knew that smart people write and then shave off a lot, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do that this time, and I wrote 145 chapters.
Oops.
But, like, the idea was that I was going to come back in and shave it all down, and the thing was that as I finished every single chapter, that was a win. Just finishing that chapter alone was me going, all right, cool. And that was why, like, when I would send off versions of the book to people for, like, beta reading purposes, like when I sent it off to, like, Jonesy, I sent it off to him. I'm like, here it is. And he was, like, the first thing he said was, like, holy crap, this is 73, because I do it in each block was its own saved part. So that you would be able to read it, and then when you were finished, you could stop, put it away, and walk away. And then if you wanted to come back tomorrow and read another chapter, you click on where you left off, and you were good to go. But there were 73 of those.
Wow.
And I was just like, and the thing was that the book wasn't necessarily a hard read. It wasn't a slow read. It was a fairly fast one. I mean, I could burn through it in an afternoon. But it was these little steps to build up to this massive piece.
Yeah.
You know, like the win came when I finally got to those last chapters, and I said, okay, I think I'm done. I think this is where I want to leave it off, so that I can have time to kind of build up for a second book. And then when I committed to doing a 5th version that would consolidate a lot of the stuff that I had previously written, I committed to the same idea, which was just chapter by chapter by chapter. Every chapter is going to be its own kind of thing, so that when I finish each one, I feel like I've achieved something. And going into the second one, I'm going to be hyped because this next bit of the story is something that I've been waiting to tell for weeks. And, you know, that was the kind of impetus behind all of it, was the idea of saying, you know, I want to tell this story. This story's been in me since I was like 13.
Yeah.
So, like, I know I want to tell it, but, you know, I could fight with the action of telling the story. I could fight with the process. Or I could just embrace it and say, you know, this is no different from going to work or, you know, having to, you know, go and mow the lawn or whatever it is. It's just a part of the thing. And if I want to get where I want to go, then I just got to suck it up and go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like I said, if or like we've been saying, you know, if the goal is what the goal is, and it's to tell a story, the baby steps approach, the setting yourself up so that it's easy to get started in the morning or whenever you're going to write. All of these things are going to help you to get to the work that needs to be done. We touched on accountability and how that works for a lot of people. And then, because the internet's the internet, you have the opposite side of the coin, where people say, if you actually want to commit to something, don't tell anybody about it. Just do it. And then nobody knows, and then finally when you're done, you can say, hey, here's Autumnville. Phil, I haven't talked to you in 10 years. You wrote 145 chapters of the book.
Yeah.
You probably need to go talk to a professional.
Yeah.
You know, but so the don't say anything approach, that what it's founded on is that fact that when you say to somebody, hey, I'm going on a diet tomorrow, I want to lose like 20 pounds. More often than not, they're going to say, that's awesome, man. Stick with it. And the idea is that you get a dopamine fix right then and there in your brain, and that feedback just makes you feel like you've already accomplished it. Like you don't even need to go and do the job. So that's kind of the opposite side of the coin. For me personally, it's accountability. I can't just not talk about what I'm up to. Like for me, that is something to talk about with everybody. It's something important to me. So it's important to me that I'm writing now. We're sitting here talking about writing, and I'm talking about my process and my motivation and everything like that. I can't just sit here and say, yep, yeah, so just writing this story. You know, I need that feedback loop personally.
If I can interject, this entire thing you're talking about with the no, don't talk about it because you want that reaction. With the project I'm working on, that was the biggest issue I had for a long time. Like there was almost 3 weeks that I was working through my head what I wanted to do, the world building and everything, and I said nothing to anybody. I never said anything to my wife, because it's almost like in my mind the creative stance from where I come from is if I felt like if I said it, then I would get out everything, and I wouldn't put it down on paper. I wouldn't put it into the creative, you know, hard copy or software, word processor, whatever that I wanted to. It would put it. I'd be telling it, and then it would be gone. Like it was all building up in here, and it was churning and creating this thing. And if I popped the cork, it would all flood out, and I would forget it. Or
I also know one thing about, because like you know about, I think we're all kind of victims of this same kind of thing, is that the second that you do bring it up and you say, hey man, you know, I got this really cool idea about this, and this, you become excessively vulnerable to other people's ideas. And people will come in and go, you know, it'd be cool is if you did this and this and this. And you're like, yeah, you know what, that's stupid. But then it sits in your head, and then a couple weeks later you find yourself introducing highly modified, but still kind of
Absolutely.
And then, because you have this kind of built-in kind of desire to, kind of give people what they want, but, at the same time, you still want everything to be definitively yours, so that at the end of the day, whenever someone says, hey, I read this, it's a really cool collaboration between you and some random guy that gave you an idea. No, you don't do that. You go, I built this, balls to bones. And you don't, because you don't want to go, yeah, Jonesy threw in this and this and this into Autumnville, and I threw this and this and this into Eli, and, whatever it is that's going on. No, like, at the end of the day, you do want your shit to be yours. Yeah. And you become excessively vulnerable to other people's ideas if you stay quiet, or if you come out.
Sure, and if you hang out with other creative types or like-minded people who are gonna, sit around a table and talk about writing, about storytelling, their feedback's gonna weigh more. So, my story that I'm working on for NaNoWriMo, I've sent to a friend of mine. And his feedback is his feedback, and he knows what storytelling is. He consumes the same culture we consume, but I knew that I could just feed it over there, and I wouldn't take all of his feedback in and say, "Damn it, he's right. I need to do this, 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 and this."
Yeah,
but
that's like right now, a very, very close friend of mine. She just sent me a story that she's been working on in multiple parts. She just sent it to me the other night, and like, my biggest fear is because she says, I really want feedback, and my biggest thing is that if I read it for feedback, then I'm reading it critically, and that's never good, so I have to kind of deliberately give myself space so that when I do read it, I can just go, I just want to consume this because the person who wrote is someone I care about very deeply, and I know that she's a really brilliant writer. And so, like, then when I start to read it and I'm like, holy shit, this is fantastic. Like, this is really, really great. That's the farthest that I feel like I can go, because I don't want to say, what I want to do is go, what, this reminds me of Lovecraft, which is one of the things that I said. Like, this reminds me of the style Lovecraft. So right then and there, it's like, bloop, yay, I'm super happy, like, I want to read more of this. And, but I don't want to say anything more than I love it, I'm super hyped, please do more, because anything else can become, something that someone can latch on to, even if you don't mean it to be something critical. You can say something critical without realizing it, and in doing so, there are people who can get shut down by that.
Yes,
And
I think that too, like, your delight, your exuberance for what she's written, as happy as you are with it, she's going to sit there and say, all right, I'm onto something. And I want to keep delivering this. And maybe they'll put too much pressure on themselves, but they know, hey, this is one of my close friends. This is somebody I talk to creatively. And they like this.
Yeah.
So I'm on a good path.
Yeah.
Anyway, for what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
It may not be marketable or sellable or anything like that, but I have someone who cares about it, who's interested in it, and who is coming along with me for, on the ride.
And on the flip side of that, for me personally, it's the negative stuff that I hold on to most dear. Like, it's one of the things that I got fussy about when we first started doing the Friday Night Writes thing, was me saying, listen, I don't want a culture of yes men going, we all know that Phil's bigger than us and that he can still powerbomb the crap out of us even though he's an old man. So we're just going to say, hey, you're doing a great job. Like, I like, if when people read something of mine and they don't like it, I want to know. And I want to know why. even if it's just, I'm not sure. It's just got a shit vibe to it. I'm just not feeling it. All right, cool. Like if it's something, if I like the story that I just posted on our site, Friday Night Rights, just a few days ago about Time to Get You Home. There was that line in it where this character, she's frantically fleeing from these things, and then I wrote, then, something happened, as a sort of pregnant pause in the storyline to make you go, okay, well, what's going on now? Right. She's been running from monsters this whole time. What could possibly be happening to make the writer go, this is something important? And I wrote it with that in mind. But the first time that I showed it off, our buddy Sean came back at me and was like, yeah, and then you wrote in this, then something happened. Like, what the hell? And I'm like,
something.
Yeah,
something and I'm like, was happening.
I was like, well,
Mr.
I mean,
Obvious.
And I tried to justify it, but then looking back at it, I was like, yeah, there's really no justification for that.
Yeah.
I wrote it in there thinking that it made perfect sense, and then, feedback proved that was wrong.
Sure.
And so then I was like, okay, cool. And of course when I reposted it, I left the line in. But, when I plan on using that for later stuff, I'll remove it because, he's 100% right. It doesn't belong in the piece as a whole. It was something that I threw in there because I was probably writing it at 4 o'clock in the morning. But, I appreciate negativity. I don't appreciate, dickishness, but, I very much appreciate when people look at, whether it's a world that I've built or a story that I've created or characters that I've designed, and for people to pick them apart, at least creatively, and say, hey, why is this guy like this, or what's up with this, or why is this way? Well, it's that way for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I know that shuts a lot of people down. I am kind of the opposite. It actually kind of motivates me, the negativity. Definitely. But a lot of that is because at the end of the day, what I do want to be able to throw up my middle fingers and go, I did it. Eat it, and then burn in hell, and I still win. So,
I think the healthy amount of both of those things is the encouragement with the criticism.
Right.
Because normal people, which you are not, are going to say, I need a little bit of encouragement. I'm in a foreign land. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what any of the road signs say. I don't know what I'm navigating here. I'm doing my best. And this is the first time I've done it. So encouragement along with criticism is going to help them a lot more than just, hey, you're doing a great job, or this is dog shit. Yeah. So,
yeah.
As Stewie Griffin puts it, the compliment sandwich.
Yeah.
Start off with the compliment, tell them how much what's crap, and then end off with the compliment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's kind of what I would say probably the majority of people need. And, maybe some people who have been at it longer, who have a different mindset or whatever, can take that, I need all encouragement or I need all criticism, and they'll be fine. But I think that a nice, healthy balance of that would be helpful for most people.
Yeah, I agree.
You guys want to talk about the dreaded just do it advice?
Yeah, I cannot stand it.
He's giving it out.
Yeah, he is.
I've got the text to prove it.
All right, so now it's time to delve into the world of the
annals
of the just do it advice. And this always comes along with motivation and all that good stuff and habit forming and how do I stay motivated to do something? And you'll always, if you just bounce onto Reddit or some kind of internet forum, somebody will pipe in and say, you gotta just do it. So I know how I feel about that advice. What about you guys? Does that help you out at all?
I can't stand it. it's such an oversimplification of, yes, it's true, but on the other hand, anyone who's ever tried to do anything knows that life gets in the way. And there are, just saying that as advice is like, standing over, someone who's dying of thirst and setting the glass of water across the room and going, yeah, it's right there, dick. Why can't you just go get it?
Get off your ass and go get a drink.
Yeah, and it's just such an oversimplification that, is frustrating, for me, and we've talked about this before, that, whenever I get asked that, do you have any advice or whatever, of just keeping at it? And, yeah, you say, well, the first thing that's important is writing, but the most important thing about that is writing to completion. Like, you can write all day, but if you're just writing scenes, you're not getting anywhere. You're not getting anything done. You have to write to completion. And if that means that your story is as a mega epic, then you have a problem, because mega epics are difficult to get done. When you have that in your mind to say, well, okay, I'm going to do something, and, but man, I'm having a hard time. Do you have any advice? And you say, well, yeah, just write. It's like, man, I want to uppercut you in the taint right now. Like, how, like, don't be stupid. Tell me what, how. Like, how do you do that? And, for me, it's always like what we were saying earlier, is that you kind of develop it into a habit. Like, I'm kind of lucky because writing is just a part of my life. It's something that I do. I sit there and I'll have a TV show running on one side of my screen and my whatever writing app I'm using at the time on the other side, so that I'm writing and I'm watching and I'm listening and doing all that stuff. But like, in order to get there, you kind of have to figure out whatever it is that motivates you, that gets you hyped, to go in and keep doing it. Like, first of all, if, like, Shawnette, if you're into doing a steampunk post-apocalyptic thing, mm-hmm. and you say, you know what, I really feel like right now I need to write about prehistoric cavemen,
yeah,
and what the trials and tribulations of their life would have been. Well, that may be an okay idea, but that's not in your wheelhouse.
No.
Yeah. So you write what you love, first of all. If you don't have a hard-on to do it, then you shouldn't do it. If you're not driven to do it. If it's not something that you're constantly thinking about, like every day when you've got time, you're driving to work, or you have a lull in your work schedule, and you've got a couple of minutes alone, or your boss is droning on about some nonsense and your mind wanders, that like you need to prepare yourself every day, all the time, for what you're doing. You need to be working on that in your head constantly, so that when you get time to sit and write, if it's a half an hour or if it's an hour or 10 hours, doesn't matter. You're excited to get to it and start pouring all this stuff out of your head. Like, you can't just say, well, I got this idea for a novel, but, I'm having a real hard time writing it, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you ask me personally, if you have an idea for a novel, then by that point you should already be fidgety because you're not writing it. Mm-hmm. Like, you should want to pour all this stuff out. You should be, looking for, if not making time to make this happen.
I think that maybe you. I don't know that. What I'd like to say is that if you're laser focused on your if you're laser focused on your steampunk post-apocalyptic world, and one day you sit down and you're like, all right, let's get this going. We got trains to run and deserts to look at and all that good stuff. And all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I really want to write about these cavemen right now. Writing about the cavemen is better than not writing about the steampunk stuff. So if it's a balance between I'm distracted by this and I can't be distracted by this, but I'm so distracted by it I can't focus on my steampunk story, then I'm just not going to write at all.
Yeah.
It's better to write about the cavemen.
Yeah,
because
hands
you are
down.
writing.
Yeah, hands
down.
I
totally agree there.
Hands down. But with that in mind, one thing that is important is that if you are working on something, like this goes back to what you were talking about earlier with, the sci-fi thing and, being kind of, like you kind of have to keep that in mind. And, one thing that, I know a lot of writers do, I've done this a few times and it has helped, is that when I have an idea, I will not cross-contaminate that idea, so that when I get home, I don't mess with TV. I don't have it in my home, any of that stuff, so that when I get home, I get on my computer, and if I'm writing horror, that's what I load up. Like I'm absolutely saturated by whatever it is that I'm going to be writing. If I'm writing a sci-fi, I have tons of science stuff up. I've got tons of science fiction stuff up. I make sure that I'm absolutely saturated in whatever it is that I'm working on, because you can get that cross-contamination happens all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes you see just a trailer. Like I remember working on Autumnville and I saw a trailer for Jupiter Ascending. And as soon as I saw that trailer, I was like, okay, I got a month of sci-fi going on now because, that trailer looks so incredible that all I could do was just work on sci-fi stuff. And I knew that it was a mistake. I knew that divergence was just going to end up harming me in the long run, but I still had to do it because now all of a sudden I had all these ideas for sci-fi. And so, like, I've made it kind of part of my routine that when I need to be laser focused on my ideas and whatever kind of world I'm crafting or whatever it is, that I will only surround myself in that theme so that I can stay really, really focused on it. And the cool thing is that when you do that, you are constantly inundated with new ideas because you're seeing things in the genre that you want to work in.
And it plays to the theme that you're likely writing towards, and the setting will be similar.
And it's not hard. A lot of people will be like, oh, well, I'm exposed to so much and this and that and the other thing. Yeah, and I get that. But I'm talking about when it's time to work,
And that's another separating factor. So, you said, somebody approaches you, I got an idea for a novel, and you almost took the tact of, well, you need to just go do that novel.
Yeah.
Because you said, well, why aren't you writing that? Why isn't that coming out right now?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times, I have an idea for a novel. I need confidence builders. Mm-hmm. I need quick wins. I need to tell stories that are shorter so that I can say, all right, I understand this craft of telling a story a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then I tell another one a little bit better. And then I see a Jupiter Ascending trailer and I go on the sci-fi tangent, and it's not wasted effort. It's not wasted motion.
No,
You're still
it's not.
growing. It's not giving you, I shouldn't say it's not giving you anything towards your work, but it actually is, because it's building your muscles.
Yeah.
It's building your
I do agree with that, but like I was saying, though, is that in the scheme of things, as far as working towards a deadline or working towards a goal, then cross-contaminating your mindset is just, it's septic. Like it's so bad for what you're trying to do.
Especially if you're prone to wandering, like we've talked about.
And if you're creative, even in the slightest way, then that's going to happen. And you can't, I met a guy just a couple weeks ago online. We were talking, and he was telling me about how he's the most uncreative human being he's ever met. But he's written 3 books. And I was like, how in the hell did you pull that off? And he was like, in my life, I go about my day-to-day stuff, and then I have an idea. And then I write that idea down, and then I go and I get the beats, the story beats. And then I work each story beat until it makes perfect sense to me. And then I sit down and I write the book. And I'm like, so how do you build characters? And he was just like, I just watch guys on TV. And I'm like, so everything about your process is essentially monkey see, monkey do, but you're just developing, you're essentially taking other people's characters, but then you're running them along your storyline. He was like, yeah, basically. And I was how do you do that?
That sounds great, but it almost sounds like you're bordering on that line of plagiarism.
Yeah.
If you're just taking, there's a difference between taking inspiration from something and straight up being like, I like the main character of Fight Club. I like Edward Norton's character. I think he's really cool. Not anyone else, just him.
Yeah.
And I want to put his character in my steampunk setting as some random, stuffed shirt that suddenly gets an epiphany.
Yeah.
And I take the character and I just change it around so that his name and traits are just slightly different. It's almost like lazy man inspiration.
Yeah.
And I guess depending on the type of writing style you're using, that works if there's a niche market for that type of reading.
But you're in that case you're almost bordering on fan fiction. But the other thing you can say is that all fiction is derivative.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we're all telling Shakespearean stories. We're all telling Greek stories. It's all derivative. So if you're pulling inspiration from the television, if you got Walter White up there, Heisenberg up there, and you're like, yep, I'm writing Heisenberg tonight, that's fine. But, don't come right out and have a drug deal go down and say my name,
right,
Heisenberg. You're goddamn right it is. Probably don't write that.
Yeah.
But you can have your Heisenberg in your story. And I don't think that's what you were necessarily saying.
No,
everything's derivative. So if you have Jack or whatever, Ed Norton, if you have a representation of him in there, that's fine. But I think you need to know where that line is of where
definitely
I'm putting someone else's character in my story.
Yeah, and and the thing is that to some degree, I think that goes on all the time. But on the other hand, it was just the process of the way that he was kind of telling me that he does things, and I was just like, how long does it take you to write a book? And he was like, 1 month.
Yeah. But see, that the fact that he openly claimed to you, I'm the most uncreative person on the planet and I have 3 books, that intro to me is either you're pure genius and you're trying to just get out there the idea of taking inspiration from things, or you're straight plagiarizing and you're just telling me that in no uncertain terms.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or even another one is you're just do it guy and you're trying
you're
to
Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah. You're
I wanted to say it so bad this entire time.
I can't believe I didn't think about it. I'm so upset with myself. So this is just do it guy just putting it that way to you, like, oh yeah, this is all that there is in my process. This is my deal. But and I think a lot of that is, honestly, I think a lot of it is people who have put in the work.
Yeah. And
they're like, nope, there's no shortcuts. I worked my ass off, so you got to work your ass off. So you just got to write every day. Just got to write every day. And I think that there's a lot of that in that advice.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they don't believe there's shortcuts, and there's not. And that's why you get that advice so much. There's no life hacks. There's no shortcuts to this. It's writer's right. Just do the work. Just effing do it. And that's it. And that's what you get dropped on you all the time, because I think a lot of them don't want to tell you their process, or they say, I have to work my ass off for this. I work really, really hard to do this.
Yeah.
And this is what it boils down to.
I see what you're saying. Personally, I think it's lazy. When I hear people use that as advice, I just get upset because, it doesn't take much to just take a minute and just dissect your process.
Sure.
And, like when I did it for this kind of, this part of the conversation, what I really kept coming back to is that, if you don't get hyped up about what you're doing, if you're not driven and you're not absolutely enthralled with your project, you have to be in love with it. And if you are, then you don't have to worry about, how do I find the time, or how do I blah, blah, blah. You will find the time to do it, and you will make the time to do it. And, and a lot of people may think that that's kind of unfair advice because they may not be in love with their project. But the truth of the matter is that if you have spent the time, if you've done the due diligence, you've world builded, you've done the world building, you've worked your 3-act structure, you found your beats, you've researched your concepts, you've developed your characters, you've spent time breathing life into them, you've written little short stories about them, you may have just written character bios, whatever it may be, but you have developed your world effectively so that the project that you're working on is as intrinsic to you as breathing is. It's as much of your thoughts as, the person that you're madly in love with, then you're on the right track. That's when you're on the right track. If you're saying, well, this is a side beat, it's, a sci-fi thing about dudes who transform into power armor suits and fly around the universe killing stuff, that's not good enough.
And that needs its own attention. Then.
Yeah.
If you need to scratch that itch,
yeah,
sure.
And that's fine. Work the development phase of that, but don't jump in and go, yeah, I'm going to write 4 books at the same time. Now, you can fall in love with multiple projects, no doubt, but before you sit down to really work a project, if it's not almost intrinsic to your being, then chances are you're not going to do it. You're just not. Unless you're one of those rando people that are able to say, here is a goal, and I am going to approach that goal come hell or high water. And those people are so few and far between. You have to have so much time in your life.
Well, time and willpower and self-discipline and things that are in short supply for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Well, reel it back a second, because the way I'm listening to you guys talk, and we're all, you guys, I consider, very practiced storytellers. I mean, you pump out the work. You both have projects that you love. When you describe that feeling of needing to tell us where you're almost love with your story, your world, both of you have those things in your world building. But let's say I'm a person that is wanting to come into it. I don't have that yet. I'm building towards it. To say just do it or writer's right, yeah, it's kind of, I agree. But at the same time, if I don't have that point yet, I'm working towards it, but I don't feel all those things yet. Do you think it's, if they don't just take the steps and start writing, putting pen to paper, fingers to keyboards, that they're not going to feel a loss of that? That maybe they're not there where you guys are because you've established yourself and you established worlds already. You're kind of experience wizened to what to your craft.
Well, jumping into the world building as haphazardly as I have is a complete separation from what Fuzz has done.
Right.
He's Bibled his world, and we've detailed that in the world building process. Because I look at world building and I'm like, I mean, I'd rather lay down in traffic than spend a week on this.
Yeah.
Honestly. But he's fine with that. But for me, I want my world to be the world that exists out there, and then I want, like, for the Eli story, for instance, there's these other things.
Right.
Okay? So all I have to do is write about these other things. And maybe I'm lazy, but I know that world.
Right.
So I don't need
But
to
I don't think that's it, though. I think the process, you guys just have different process. You are like me. You're like, you like to archive things. You like to find the layers of the onions and write those layers so that you have them and they're established. Maybe you're still building on it, but it's there. You seem to, Josie, like jump in and experience the world as fresh-minded as your reader. And I noticed that with your guys' writing styles when I was reading some of your stories, is that, I could tell that Fuzz is very much like a Miskatonic archival student that has everything down and knows it, and it's all locked away up here in the library. And you know your mythos, but you're as ready to jump in and be as dynamic with it and let it come to you through the writing as much as socking all that away upstairs once it's already been put into play.
Well, and I think a lot of that too is that, I mean, not to diminish any of it, but Fuzz has had his world built for 7-8 years. I mean, going strong, right?
Arguably, I can go back to when I was 13.
Well, sure, yeah, okay.
But yeah, I mean,
so the dynamics of your world have been around,
yeah,
and the Eli world is a year old,
right?
So the idea of it's a year old. The world itself has been building and building, but it's probably not even a year old,
right?
So, and that goes a lot along with what you're saying, but.
And maybe I'm playing devil's advocate.
But no, I can't. But I can't sit here and say that if I had the time that Fuzz has been married to Autumnville,
right,
with this story, I can't tell you that I have nearly as much information about my story as what Fuzz has.
One of the things, though, that I think Shaunette's getting at is that, like, as a writer, I have volumes of information about Autumnville that the reader will never know. Like, I know what Lowell's favorite color is. I know, what all of the little sub information is. All the little things. I know the books that, this character has on his bookshelf. Like all these little things. Because for me, developing the story means that you're developing the world brick by brick by brick. And, and it's just a stylistic difference. Whereas, like, your development is basically, well, I'm using the real world, so I don't have to develop that. That's already there. And so I'm just going to add in. I'm just going to sort of enhance the world as I see it. Whereas, like, mine deals with alternate timeline and all kinds of other things. I mean, for Christ's sake, I wrote, a whole chapter in my notebook for Autumnville, and I think I showed it to you, where I describe the universe before it began. Yeah. I mean, that's how far back I went. Like I went back 14.6 billion years. And so, like, that's a little too obsessive, I think, for most writers. But at the same vein is that when you're building your world, if you want to write, for me, and this doesn't necessarily apply to anybody else, but as an exercise, I highly suggest it, is that you spend the time before you start writing your story and you just start imagining all of the minutia in your world, all the tiny bits, stuff that you're never going to write, stuff that you're never going to tell another living soul, because it informs your writing.
Yes.
And it gives you it gives you an authority when you write, of saying, I have details that you don't, so stick with me and maybe you'll get them. it can be a tricky process, but it's really not that hard. Like you said, I Bible almost every project that I work on, and I do that for a reason. I think it's important. Stephen King says, "Nah, I don't write anything down. I just sit down and I write." Well, you know what? You're Stephen King. Shut up. You can do crazy shit. The rest of us, we're not quite there yet.
We're not superheroes.
And so, for me, development is the most important part. Writing it is not that tough. Lowell walked into a room. He saw a thing. He didn't know what it was. Period.
That is Autumnville, the children's book.
Yes.
And available on bookstores soon.
But the writing, you can learn to write by reading your favorite authors. The style that you want to write in is out there. Buy a book. Read it. If you have trouble with that first opening paragraph, go to the opening paragraph of your first book, your favorite book, and just read it and go, okay. Steal it. Write whatever you need, however you need. You don't have to be an English major to do all this stuff. The trick is that if you've developed properly, there's no reason to fail. The world is sitting there and it's waiting to tell your stories, and it wants to, if you've given it the TLC that it needs.
But, yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. But, getting back to what initially started us off on this tangent was, what do I do? Or what does someone do who's not embroiled in a world that they're actively writing in? And I don't know. The story that came to me was just simple. And then it just built from there, layers upon layers, as I thought more and more about it. And I think, maybe you have to find that idea that you're in love with. And honestly, I was on the lookout, quote unquote, for a world where I could keep returning to, because we were doing the prompts, and Fuzz had Autumnville, and I'm like, man, every time we have a prompt, he just posts another story in Autumnville that he knows so well. I need a world that I can keep on returning to. And so I think with that, I kept on building things in my head and writing them down and building different mythologies and everything like that got me to where I'm at now, which is still just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
So I don't know what came first for me. It's probably the fact that, hey, this idea is interesting to me. I want to tell this story. Mm-hmm. And it's that good and evil overlap.
I think you're hitting on a point there. You both are, in the fact that I think Fuzz has got the culmination of where you want to be as a writer, and you're telling me back to the process of. I think I have to say I think there is some begrudgingly there's some accreditation to the just right or writer's right thing, in the sense that if you could, I've known so many people that I've talked to that I have all these, they say I have all these great ideas, but I don't know where to start. I have this whole world in my head. And they'll start telling you all about their world, but they won't put it to paper. And I think a lot of that is that they're finding reasons to not do it. And at some point they maybe they start writing it and they hate it after they put it to paper, mm-hmm. and they feel disheartened about it. Yeah. But if they keep at the process, eventually they're gonna find that thing that they love, that world that's been waiting for them, and they're gonna get that inspiration and that culmination of the practice of trying to get their mindset into that creative, that habit of doing it and being motivated. Eventually, the two will meet, and there'll be the spark that they need to start doing what they need to do, and they're going to love, and the world building and all that's going to come with it.
As an aside, to kind of go back to what you were saying, is that when people are at that mode where they're saying, I want to, but I don't know how, one of the key things that you always have to remember, and I learned this from Trey and Matt of South Park, is that you never say and then. You always say therefore. So that every single move, every single part, every single thing that you build is just a matter of mathematics. even if you suck at math, you can always do the therefore math because it's just logistics. It's just, I walked through the door, therefore I'm in the room. I talked to her, therefore I just got shut down. Now I go home and I'm sad. Like the therefores are also key to building your storyline and, most importantly, finding the motivation to do it. Because if you use the therefore method, when you sit down and you say, okay, cool, I want to write a story about, fairies and dragons. Okay, cool. Well, where does that world begin? Because obviously that's where you start, and then you build by a series of therefores. I mean, if you look at, say, Tolkien, for example, and you go back to the Silmarillion, which is a mess, it's still based on a whole series of therefores. So that, you have the creation of the universe, the Iluvatar character, the creator of all things. And the creator of all things was Malcor. And he's the first, and it's all just a Christian parable. But it's still based on a series of therefores. Once you establish that there's a creator entity who can do whatever it wants, therefore becomes super easy. And so if you're developing a world that's based, say, in the real world, you have an instantaneous, motivational sort of aid there, because the therefores become very simple. If I commit a crime, therefore I become a criminal. Like there's all kinds of therefores that become super easy to follow and allow you to build, I think, easier than if you try to and then. My guy walked into the store and then a clown flew out and hit him in the face. Okay. Like, how did that happen?
It happens all the time.
Yeah, it's just like, wow, that's a night at Walmart, but like, like where's the therefore? So like, and you're constantly having to backtrack with the therefore because you have to find the reason. And if there's no reason, then you can't go forward. You have to find the motivation, you have to find the reason, and therefore gets you there, so easily, because it's just a matter of what is logically consistent with the world that you're building. And as a method of motivation, keeping that in mind does kind of give you an edge in the creation process. Because if you say, well, I want to write a book about what would have happened had JFK not been assassinated. Okay, well, cool. Now we have an easy therefore. He survives the attack, therefore, and you find out what was his plans. What were the logical things? You become invested in what you're doing.
And it kicks you down the story road.
Yeah.
Immediately. So if you in that instance, you take that event, like, what if it happened this way?
Yeah.
And that starts you off on whatever pathway you're going to go down. And I think too, what this draws us back to the baby steps thing. This cuts pieces out of your storytelling process. So I can start really small, really small in the grand scheme of things. The Big Bang happened, therefore there were planets, therefore, and you can start thin slicing everything.
Yeah.
And you can start taking a smaller look at everything and analyzing everything all the way down to ultimately who is your main character.
Yeah.
And how did he get there, or he or she get there? And that baby step approach from earlier that was not even a part of what the storytelling action is, applies here too.
Yeah.
As long as, making it as easy as possible to get a hold of, wrap your hands around it, get into, that's what's going to help, I think, get you started.
If somebody came up to me right now and said, hey, you know what, I'm having a hard time finding the motivation to write my story. The first thing that I would say is, what's going on in your life that's keeping you from doing that? Well, I got, kids, life, work is in the way. Okay, cool. Fair enough. When do you get up in the morning? Well, I get up at this time in the morning. All right, cool. Get up an hour earlier, and, go sit on the can. That's the only place in any house that you can sit down and not be bothered. And just grab a pad of paper and just sit there and just start jotting down your notes. Don't think too much about it, and just do that for the next 2 weeks. Every day, wake up, go sit on the can, write down some notes, come up with some ideas, some characters, names, places, dates, whatever. If you're building a world, then go look for a resource that's going to help you do that. But, get up an hour earlier. Do that. When you go to work, how long do you have on break? Well, I got a 15-minute break here. I got a 15-minute break there. All right, cool. Bring your pad of paper. When you sit down, just do your best to clear your head. Write down some notes. Keep writing notes. Just keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. And it might take you a year. It might take you 5. It might take you 20. But sooner or later, you're going to have what you need, and you're going to be able to sit down and write your book. The truth of the matter is that if you're impatient and you want the now, you're not going to find it. You're just not. There's no way to force that kind of thing. And that's another thing that drove me nuts. I was listening to a podcast with Chuck Wendig, and I know he's your boy, but man, when he said, "Oh yeah, you can force art," I was like, "You dumb shit." I was like, "No, you can't."
No.
I was like, "No, you can't." I was like, "You can force crap. You can do that. You can force half-assed." And there's tons of really great things that are half-assed. No doubt. There's great things out there that are highly beloved and brilliant, but they're half-assed, and you can tell if you have a keen eye for that kind of thing. If you wanted, I don't consider being a writer being an artist. But that's me personally. That's a whole different ball of wax. I consider writers. There are some writers that were artists, but I consider writing being a storyteller. You're no different from shamans, back in the caveman days, telling spooky stories to keep kids safe or make hunters hyped up to go out and kill stuff. You're part of a community when you're a writer, and if people are enthralled by your words, then you're doing the right thing. But forcing art, it's just stupid. It drives me crazy, and I know that you don't necessarily agree with that.
I don't know if this was his point, but go ahead and force the art, but the art that you forced does not have to be your final draft. It's not the last word of your story.
No.
So force the words out, get the words down, and that's what we're talking about, is the writing practice, and then you can come back, you can return to it and go back through it.
I admit I can't argue with that. But the thing is that when you take the route of what I'm doing is art, then there is a kind of essence that comes with that word. That, what you're doing is inspired, and what you're doing is the culmination of a series of technical capabilities that you are bringing to bear on that project. And the final piece is not just going to be a good read. It's going to be an inspiring work. And it's going to be something that is going to last for a long, long, long time. Yeah. That is a Tolkien. That is, some, not all, but some Lovecraft. You've got quite a few writers, maybe that Shakespeare guy had a couple. There were a few things that he did that were all right. And, but that's the artistic side of it. When you're a novel writer, you're a blue collar, you're a blue collar worker. The only difference is that when you're shoveling shit, you're doing it in your mind. you know. And so, like, when I saw that, I was like, it was like, you know, A, you're either taking what you do way too seriously, or B, you're taking the rest of us not seriously.
Well, I think I probably agree with your definition of art,
no.
But as you said before you got into all that, is, you know, your definition of art could be, you know, and I kind of agree with you when I say that's a work of art. It's like, you know, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, that's the terminology I'm using to describe that.
Yeah.
But I think in the end, that's kind of a, you know,
and I think that is something that is definitely a negative force against people who want to write as a kind of motivation, is because people do look at the novel writing process as if you were an artist, and a lot of people have a fear of that word,
or that their confidence is going to suffer if they do not produce something that is awe-inspiring or whatever. Yeah,
you know, and it's the same thing that I tell people who have trouble, say, drawing. You know, and I only use that because it's a skill that I have. You know, like, I've been able to draw for years, and you know, and the thing about that is that, you know, I don't draw realistically. I don't draw, you know, technically. You know, like, there's a lot of technical stuff to the way that I draw, like anatomical observation and stuff like that. But I prefer to work in a very cartoony way. You know, I enjoy the comic book style of art, and that's how I kind of try to approach stuff that I do. And when I'm drawing and people are like, "Oh man, you know, I could never do that. Oh, you're such an artist," and you know, I'm like, "Dude, no, like, no." You know, like, that word does not apply to me. You know, I put scratches on paper, and your eyes tell your brain that looks cool because it looks like something, but it's not. It's actually just a bunch of crap on paper that your brain goes, "That looks like a dragon. That's really cool. You're an artist." No, not really. You know, like, I've been doing this since I was like 5 years old, you know? And so obviously I've developed the skill at doing it. You know, and it's no different than being a writer. If you're just starting off in a writer and you are a complete rookie, then assign yourself. You know, if you're saying, "Man, I'm having a hard time getting hyped up. I'm having a hard time finding the motivation to do this," write a 500-word story. Don't write a story even. Just write a scene. You know, like, watch an episode of Friends and watch how that show is just scene after scene after scene. And you start to realize, okay, there's a thoroughfare, and that's called the plot. And the characters interacting throughout that plot are the story. And that's how you tell the story. You develop the plot, point A, point B, point C, and then what do the characters do in the process of moving from point A to point B to point C? And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to write a 500-word little blurb, you know, and then tomorrow I'm going to continue that. And then the next day, I'm going to continue that. And if you're only pumping out 500 words a day, it's going to take forever to do anything. But you're learning. You're working those muscles. You're getting that skill.
Well, and furthermore, it comes back to something that started off this whole discussion, is momentum. Mm-hmm. And you get the ball rolling, and momentum gets greater and greater. It's a hard force to stop. So you keep moving forward, or you keep writing, even if you're writing about cavemen, mm-hmm. even if you're writing about how your opinion of the word art is different from somebody else's mm-hmm. opinion of the word art, or if we write about, you know, anything under the sun, mm-hmm. as long as you keep moving forward, you're going to keep learning and growing and getting stronger.
Yeah.
And then when it's time to sit down and jump into the world building, and jump into plotting your novel, and jump into plotting your screenplay, or whatever the case may be, your storytelling prowess, your muscles, your ability to bench press, all of that stuff is going to be more formidable at that point in time mm-hmm. because you've kept going and kept going and kept going. So I think really the best advice is to just do it.
Yeah, asshole. It's true. I mean, And God damn it, I hate it. It makes me crazy.
I noticed we kind of came full circle back to that.
I feel like we failed.
It's true, though. I mean,
it is.
And like it is one of those things, though, that, like I said, is that that you just have to sit down and you have to do it. But before that, there is a process. And if you find it and you let yourself get hyped about your work, and you make it a part of you, and everywhere you go and every person you talk to, everything in your world begins to inform that project, and a lot of people dog the hell out of me for Bibling, especially the way that I do, because they say, oh, well, it's just a waste of time. You're adding, there's so many variables, there's so much crap in here that is just not needed. Well, yes, it is. Because my whole life, every action that I've taken, everything that I've done is just the result of an equation of hundreds of thousands of millions of variables that I have experienced up until this very moment. And that's all it is. And one of those little things is out of whack, or I don't understand something, or I don't have the requisite amount of detail behind one particular thing that I need in order to inform now, then I make a mistake, or I freeze up. I don't know what to do right now. All those kinds of things can happen. And and that's the thing, is that if you inform your world before you sit down to write it and you've built it, you can't go wrong. There's no degree of physics that will exist in that world that you don't know how to break or bend, but never break. You'll never jump the shark because you'll always know where the shark is. You'll always know how to avoid it. And that's a problem that a lot of writers don't have, because inevitably you have that jump the shark moment in most things that, where it just gets ridiculous for whatever reason. And I know most of those things are sensationalism and things to get ratings or more viewers, or just develop a conversation to draw attention to what people are doing.
Sure.
But the point is, I think, still sound, is that, develop first and develop ad nauseum, so that you never have to sit there and ask a question. Ask me anything about Autumnville and I can tell you the answer. It might take a while, but I can do it. I'm that familiar with my whole world.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a long time. But, a lot of people are a hell of a lot smarter than I am. And if they're going to sit down and do this, chances are they're going to find a way to truncate the process so that they can get a shitload of information down very, very quickly. You don't need to spend 20 years of your life on one stupid story. Like God knows I have. And I wonder, why am I so dumb? Why haven't I done 40 things in the time that it takes most people to do one? It's just like, this sucks. But you can do it. It's not tough. It's just a matter of planning.
And as a bonus, all that preparedness, all that plotting, you got a right to do that.
Yeah.
So you're going to get into the practice. You're going to get involved in your story every day, and it's going to become a habit.
Yeah. One of the things that I do suggest, though, is that, and I think we have touched on this before, is that if you're going to build, you're going to world build. Don't do it on a computer. Don't sit at a keyboard and do it. Get a pen and get paper and write that stuff down. Write until your hand is bleeding. But keep writing, because typing it, you're not going to remember it. It's going to get flushed right out of your head, and now it's on the screen, and now you got to go back and hunt for it. You sit down and you write it by hand, and you got to sit there, with your gigantic, meat hands and just the man walk. You have to sit there and really focus on what you're doing. Those notes. and you're not going to need to pour over them a lot because they're going to be, stuck in your head.
I have to agree with you there because there's so many times when I've taken something that I'm world building and I just naturally go to a pad and paper and a pen and start writing it down.
Yeah.
And, I could 2 weeks later tell you everything I wrote, or if I typed it, it's like it gets a little off. Like my memory gets a little fuzzy about that point. And I think it's because you feel like it almost feels like a sense of labor.
Yeah.
But it's a labor of love that you're putting into it.
Yeah.
I think there's some science that backs that I'm probably wrong about.
Yeah.
But I think that there is some data behind that
you
actually actively
wrong.
do it both at the same time.
65% of the time, Jonesy is right every time.
Yeah.
That doesn't even make sense. Yeah. So, do you guys have anything else on motivation?
No, I'm definitely motivated to get this one done.
So just write already. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Just got to do it.
Yeah. Just do it. Asshole. Well, that's it on motivation. I'm super motivated to be done with this episode. And so are Shawnette and Jonesy here, who are both exhausted. We've had a long day.
Sleeping.
Do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it. So, we did it.
Let your dreams be dreams.
Yeah. And that's about it on motivation. We've pretty much killed this one too.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything ever left to be said about motivation or horror.
Yeah. We've definitely
covered it.
Definitely beaten that horse dead.
So anyway, we are hoping to have this up on iTunes this week in a podcast feed. If you find us on iTunes, we appreciate it. Please give us a subscribe, like our podcast, leave a comment, even if you hate us. Actually, if you hate us, I don't know, you can probably just ignore it. But we'll be on YouTube too. We'd appreciate a subscription on YouTube and a like. Any comments, feedbacks you can give us on there, it'd be great. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/FNWrites. We post the updates on the podcast on there and some site updates as we get them. Also, our website is FridayNightWrites.net. That's where our story roll is. You'll see some updates on our NaNoWriMo activity for me and Fuzz, and hopefully some stories from some other collaborators as well. I think that covers all of that stuff.
Yeah. What was the INXS song?
I give up.
With the cards?
Like you're hungry like the wolf?
No. I think you can sum up the whole podcast with that one song. If you know the song I'm talking about, INXS, where he's holding up those dumbass cards and he's flipping them around like a lunatic behind him, probably poking out the eye of small children.
You knocked this straight out of the park.
Dude, I just hammered the hell out of it. Watch that video. Like whatever the hell that damn song is called, I can't remember. Watch it.
It's past all of our bedtime here, so
yeah.
Thank you for listening. Like I said, please give us a like on YouTube, subscribe, all that good stuff. We appreciate everybody's feedback and for listening to us.
Yeah, sure. See you guys later.
Thanks.
Bye.
She's the kind of girl you dream of keeping hold of. Better forget it. Ooh, you'll regret it. And she'll say that there's no one love till she